Chapter 1. The Maverick and the Saboteur. The press conference was held in a vast, high-tech auditorium, its walls adorned with holographic displays of distant galaxies and celestial wonders. The room was packed with journalists, scientists, and dignitaries from around the world, all eagerly awaiting the groundbreaking announcement. The air was electric with anticipation, the hum of whispered conversations filling the space like the buzz of a beehive. At the podium stood Dr. Evelyn Carter, the lead scientist of the Stellar Dawn Project. She was a woman of formidable intellect and presence, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd as she prepared to deliver the news that would change the course of human history.
Ladies and gentlemen,
She began, her voice steady and clear.
we stand on the brink of a new era. For centuries, humanity has gazed at the stars, dreaming of what lies beyond our reach. Today, I am thrilled to announce that those dreams are about to become reality.
A hush fell over the room as a holographic image of Jupiter and its moons materialized behind Dr. Carter. The image zoomed in on one of the moons, revealing a rugged, icy landscape.
During a recent expedition to Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, our team made a discovery that defies belief. Buried beneath the ice, we found deposits of an exotic material unlike anything we've ever encountered. We've named it Euphorium.
The holographic display shifted to show a sample of Euphorium, a shimmering, crystalline substance that seemed to pulse with an inner light.
Euphorium's unique properties allow it to manipulate spacetime, effectively enabling faster-than-light travel. After rigorous testing and research, we have developed a reactor that harnesses the power of Euphorium. This reactor is the heart of the Stellar Dawn Project, and it will propel humanity beyond our solar system for the first time.
The room erupted in applause, the magnitude of the announcement sinking in. Dr. Carter waited for the excitement to subside before continuing.
Our first test flight, piloted by the Navy's top test pilot, Marcus Sturluson, is scheduled to launch from our moon station in just a few days. This mission will be the culmination of years of research and development, and it represents the dawn of a new age for humanity.
As the press conference concluded, Marcus Sturluson watched from the back of the room, his mind already focused on the upcoming mission. He knew the risks were immense, but the opportunity to be the first human to travel faster than light was a challenge he couldn't resist. Meanwhile, on the moon station, the final preparations for the launch were underway. Engineers and technicians worked tirelessly to ensure that every component of the rocket and reactor was in perfect condition. Among them was Brian Zeman, a low-ranking enlisted man tasked with janitorial duties. Brian's bitterness and resentment had only deepened since the discovery of Euphorium. He saw the Stellar Dawn Project as yet another reminder of his own insignificance. Brian had become entangled with a zealot group known as God's Holy Right Hand. They believed that the Euphorium reactor was an affront to God's natural order, a blasphemy that must be stopped at all costs. Brian had found a sense of purpose in their cause, and he had been chosen to sabotage the mission. As Marcus prepared for the test flight, the launch was being televised, a spectacle that had captured the attention of the entire world. The rocket stood tall on the launch pad, a gleaming testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Marcus climbed into the cockpit, his mind focused and clear. He performed his pre-flight checks with meticulous precision, unaware that Brian had already set his plan into motion. Brian had spent weeks studying the reactor, learning its intricacies and vulnerabilities. He had waited for the perfect moment, biding his time until the world was watching. As the countdown began, Brian slipped unnoticed into the restricted area, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He knew that what he was about to do would change everything. The launch proceeded smoothly at first. The rocket roared to life, its engines blazing with the fury of 1,000 suns. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the rocket lifted off, breaking free from the moon's gravitational pull. But then something went wrong. Alarms blared in the cockpit, and Marcus's instruments went haywire. He struggled to regain control, but it was too late. The reactor had been sabotaged, and the rocket was spiraling out of control. The world watched in horror as the rocket veered off course, its trajectory becoming erratic and unpredictable. Marcus fought with every ounce of his skill, but the forces at play were beyond his control. In a blinding flash of light, the rocket disappeared from the screens, leaving only a void where it had once been. Back on Earth, the silence was deafening. The world had witnessed the unthinkable. Marcus Sturluson, the Navy's finest test pilot, had vanished into the unknown. The implications were staggering, and the questions were endless. Where had he gone? Was he still alive? And what had caused the catastrophic failure? In the control room, Dr. Carter stared at the empty screen, her mind racing. She knew that the reactor's malfunction could not have been a simple accident. Someone had sabotaged the mission. Her thoughts turned to the crew and personnel on the moon station. Who could have done this? And why? As the dust settled, investigations began immediately. Security footage was scrutinized, and every piece of equipment was examined for clues. It didn't take long for the trail to lead to Brian Zeman. His access to the restricted areas and his recent, suspicious behavior made him the prime suspect. Brian was quickly apprehended and subjected to intense interrogation. Under the pressure, he confessed to his involvement with God's holy right hand and his role in sabotaging the reactor. The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific and military communities. The Zealot group had managed to infiltrate one of the most secure facilities in the world, and their actions had potentially doomed humanity's greatest endeavor. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself in an entirely different reality. The blinding flash of light had transported him to a place that defied explanation. The cockpit around him seemed both familiar and alien. The stars outside the window were different, their constellations unrecognizable. He was no longer in the solar system he knew. Marcus's training kicked in, and he began to assess his situation. The reactor, though damaged, was still operational. He ran diagnostics and tried to establish communication with the moon station, but all his attempts were met with silence. He was alone, adrift in an unknown universe. As he navigated this strange new reality, Marcus encountered phenomena that challenged his understanding of physics and space-time. Planets with impossible landscapes, stars that pulsed with an eerie light, and alien structures that hinted at civilizations long gone. He realized that the Euphorium reactor had not just propelled him faster than light. It had transported him to an alternate dimension. Back on Earth, the world grappled with the loss of Marcus and the failure of the Stellar Dawn project. Dr. Carter and her team redoubled their efforts to understand what had happened and how to bring Marcus back. They knew that the key lay in the Euphorium reactor and the exotic material's unique properties. As days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. But Dr. Carter refused to give up. She believed that Marcus was still out there, somewhere, and she was determined to find a way to reach him. The discovery of Euphorium had opened a door to the stars, and she was not about to let it close. Chapter 2: The New Frontier. Marcus Sturluson floated in the cockpit of his ship, the vast darkness of space around him punctuated by unfamiliar stars and celestial bodies. The initial shock of the reactor malfunction and the subsequent blinding flash of light had left him disoriented. But now, as the reality of his situation began to sink in, Marcus knew he had to come to terms with this new reality. His ship, although damaged, was still functional. The advanced instruments and diagnostic systems were his lifeline in this alien universe. Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself as he began to assess his surroundings. The stars outside the window were different, their constellations unrecognizable. He was no longer in the solar system he knew. As he navigated through the void, a blip on his radar caught his attention. The instruments indicated a nearby planet, one that showed signs of life. Marcus's heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He adjusted his course, steering the ship toward the planet. As he approached, the planet's surface came into view. It was a vibrant world with lush green forests, towering mountain ranges, and vast oceans. Using the ship's instruments, Marcus scanned the surface and detected cities and roads, clear indicators of intelligent life. Relief washed over him. He had found a world that could potentially support him. Marcus conducted a series of tests to verify the planet's ability to sustain human life. The atmosphere was breathable, with a composition similar to Earth's. The gravity was slightly lighter, but within tolerable limits. The water sources appeared clean, and the vegetation was rich and diverse. From a biological standpoint, the planet was a perfect match. As he prepared to land, something unexpected happened. The ship's sensors detected a powerful gravitational anomaly. Before Marcus could react, the ship was caught in an invisible force, dragging it into the planet's orbit. Alarms blared as the ship was pulled into a rapid descent, spiraling toward the surface. Marcus fought to regain control, but the force was too strong. The ship hurtled through the atmosphere, the heat shields glowing red-hot as they struggled to withstand the intense friction. The landscape below rushed up to meet him, a blur of greens and browns. With a deafening crash, the ship plummeted into a dense forest, tearing through trees and underbrush before coming to a jarring halt. The impact knocked the wind out of Marcus, and for a moment, everything went dark. When he came to, the cockpit was filled with the sounds of creaking metal and the smell of burning electronics. Marcus groaned, his body aching from the crash. He quickly checked the ship systems. Many were offline, but life support was still operational. Marcus took a moment to collect himself. He was alive, and that was what mattered. He unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat and grabbed his survival gear. The ship's hull was breached, and he needed to get outside to assess the situation. Donning his gear, Marcus exited the wrecked ship and stepped into the wilderness. The air was fresh and filled with the scent of blooming flowers and damp earth. He took a deep breath, savoring the sensation. For a moment, he allowed himself to appreciate the beauty of this new world. The forest around him was dense and teeming with life. Strange birds called from the treetops, and unfamiliar creatures scurried through the underbrush. Marcus knew he needed to find help and make contact with the planet's inhabitants. He activated his portable scanner and began to make his way through the forest, hoping to find a road or path that would lead him to civilization. As he walked, he marveled at the flora and fauna, some of which seemed familiar, while others were entirely alien. As Marcus made his way through the dense forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The crash landing had undoubtedly drawn attention, and he needed to stay on high alert. The forest was alive with strange sounds and movements, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig set his nerves on edge. After hours of trekking, Marcus finally stumbled upon a well-trodden road. Relief washed over him as he realized he was on the path to civilization. But before he could take another step, a group of 3 small, green, ugly creatures emerged from the underbrush. They were about the size of small children, with sharp teeth and beady eyes. Goblins. The goblins must have seen the craft landing and had come to investigate. They stopped when they saw him, grunting and chattering in a language Marcus couldn't understand. The tension was palpable as the goblins eyed him suspiciously. Marcus raised his hands in a gesture of peace.
"I don't mean any harm,"
he said, hoping his tone would convey his intentions.
"I'm just trying to find help."
The goblins continued to grunt and chatter, their expressions unreadable. Marcus tried a few more phrases, but it was clear they didn't understand him. The situation was growing increasingly tense, and Marcus could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins. Suddenly, one of the goblins emitted a high-pitched scream and charged at Marcus, brandishing a crude weapon. The attack was clumsy and uncoordinated, but it caught Marcus off guard. He sidestepped the goblin's lunge and instinctively tripped it. The goblin stumbled forward, hitting its head on a rock in the path and knocking itself out cold. The other 2 goblins wasted no time. They let out guttural cries and rushed at Marcus, weapons raised. Knowing he was outnumbered and unarmed, Marcus made a split-second decision. He turned and ran, sprinting down the road as fast as his legs could carry him. The goblins gave chase, their footsteps pounding behind him. Marcus's heart raced as he pushed himself to keep running. The forest blurred past him, and he could hear the goblin snarls growing fainter with each passing second. He had to find a way to lose them. Up ahead, Marcus spotted a dense thicket of bushes and trees. Without hesitation, He veered off the road and plunged into the underbrush, hoping the thick foliage would slow the goblins down. He wove through the trees, ducking under branches and leaping over roots, his breath coming in ragged gasps. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally dared to glance back. The goblins were nowhere in sight. He slowed to a stop, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The forest was eerily silent, save for the distant calls of birds and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Marcus leaned against a tree, his mind racing. He had narrowly escaped the goblins, but he knew he couldn't stay in the forest forever. He needed to find help and make contact with the planet's inhabitants. Gathering his resolve, Marcus set off once more, determined to find a way out of the wilderness and into the safety of civilization. Chapter 3: The Transformation. Marcus awoke to the sound of birds chirping, their melodies foreign yet strangely soothing. He sat up, the morning light filtering through the dense canopy above. The events of the past few days had been nothing short of surreal, and he still struggled to make sense of it all. His once high-tech gear had been inexplicably transformed into medieval equipment. He took stock of his situation, examining his new gear with a mix of bewilderment and curiosity. Leather boots, pants, and a tunic had replaced his synthetic spacesuit. A rudimentary backpack now held his essentials: a short sword, a bow with 40 arrows, 10 feet of rope, flint and steel, a knife, and several hunting snares. His MREs had been replaced by several days' worth of cheese, salted meat, and dry tack. A small bag attached to his waist contained 30 copper coins and 10 silver coins, each inscribed with strange writing. Marcus shook his head, trying to dispel the confusion. How had this happened? Was it some kind of advanced alien technology, or perhaps a bizarre side effect of the crash? He had no answers, only questions. After the initial shock wore off, Marcus decided to make the best of his situation. He returned to the crash site, only to find that his spaceship had been replaced by an old-fashioned sailing vessel, its keel broken, but still offering some semblance of shelter. He used the ship as a base for the next few days, slowly coming to terms with his new reality. Water was not a problem, as a small stream ran near the campsite. However, his food supplies were dwindling, and he knew he needed to find a more sustainable source of nourishment. He set a few snares a short distance from the camp, but had no luck catching anything. With only a few days' rations left, Marcus decided to scout the area further. After 3 hours of exploring a 5-kilometer radius around the crash site, he stumbled upon ancient ruins. The crumbling stone structures were overgrown with vines and moss, a testament to the passage of time. As he cautiously approached, he spotted several rats the size of medium-sized dogs scurrying about. Not wanting to get too close, Marcus set several snares near the ruins and retreated to the forest to observe. After about an hour, one of the rats ventured close to a snare and got caught, its arm trapped in the crude device. The rat emitted a high-pitched scream and began to flail about. Marcus knew he had to act quickly before the rat freed itself. He drew his short sword and rushed toward the struggling creature. The rat, despite its injury, attempted to fight back, scratching and biting at him. Marcus received several scratches, but managed to land a decisive blow, killing the rat. Breathing heavily, he collected his prize and retrieved the other snares. The rat was larger than he had anticipated, and it would provide a substantial meal. He made his way back to camp, eager to have his first warm meal in days. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus roasted the rat over a crackling fire. The scent of cooking meat filled the air, a welcome change from the bland rations he had been subsisting on. He ate slowly, savoring each bite. Over the next several days, Marcus refined his snaring technique, setting traps around the ancient ruins and waiting patiently for the oversized rats to fall into them. Each successful hunt brought him food and a growing sense of confidence. He noticed that with each kill, he became more adept at avoiding the rats' desperate attacks. By the time he had dispatched his third rat, he no longer feared their scratches and bites. His movements were precise and efficient, his short sword finding its mark with practiced ease. However, as the days passed, Marcus noticed the rats were becoming more scarce. It seemed he was thinning out the colony, and he knew he couldn't rely on this source of food indefinitely. The thought of exploring deeper into the ruins loomed in his mind, but he hesitated. There was something unsettling about the crumbling structures, as if they held secrets better left undisturbed. On the 10th day, after dispatching yet another rat, Marcus experienced a strange sensation. It was as if a surge of energy coursed through his body, filling him with newfound strength and speed. He stood there, bewildered, trying to make sense of the sudden change. His muscles felt more powerful, his reflexes sharper. It was as if he had leveled up in some kind of game. What was that? Marcus muttered to himself, flexing his fingers and testing his newfound abilities. He couldn't explain it, but he felt invigorated, more capable than he had been just moments before. He chalked it up to yet another strange aspect of this new world, a place where the rules of reality seemed to bend and shift. With the rat population dwindling, Marcus knew he had to explore further into the ruins. He spent the next day preparing, ensuring his gear was in order and his snares were ready. He also took the time to practice with his bow, honing his aim. If he encountered anything more dangerous than rats, he wanted to be ready. The following morning, Marcus set out for the ruins, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The ancient structures loomed before him, their stone walls covered in moss and vines. He moved cautiously, his senses heightened by the strange energy that now coursed through him. As he ventured deeper into the ruins, the air grew cooler and the light dimmer. The sounds of the forest faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Marcus's footsteps echoed off the stone walls, the only sound in the otherwise still environment. He came across a large archway, its surface adorned with intricate carvings. The symbols were unfamiliar, but they seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly glow. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then stepped through the archway, his sword at the ready. Beyond the archway, the ruins opened up into a vast chamber. The ceiling was high, supported by massive stone columns. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it, a small, ornate box. Marcus approached cautiously, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. As he reached the pedestal, he noticed the box was covered in the same glowing symbols as the archway. He felt a strange compulsion to open it, as if it held the answers to the mysteries of this world. With a deep breath, Marcus lifted the lid. Inside, he found a small, crystalline vial filled with a shimmering liquid. He picked it up, feeling a warmth emanate from the vial. Instinctively, he knew this was something powerful, something that could change his fate in this strange new world. Marcus pocketed the vial and turned to leave the chamber. As he made his way back through the ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he quickened his pace. When he finally emerged from the ruins and returned to his camp, Marcus felt a sense of relief. He had survived another day, and he had found something of great importance. Whatever the vial contained, he knew it was a key to understanding this world and perhaps finding a way back home. For now, he would rest and gather his strength. Tomorrow, he would decide what to do next. As he lay by the fire, the strange energy still coursing through him, Marcus couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. He was a survivor, and he would find a way to adapt to this strange new world. Chapter 4: The Necromancer's Wrath. In the heart of a desolate tower, shrouded in perpetual twilight, the necromancer Thalor Voss brooded over his scrying pool. The surface of the dark, enchanted water shimmered, revealing scenes from distant lands and hidden places. Thalor's eyes, cold and calculating, were fixed on the image of Marcus emerging from the ancient ruins, the crystalline vial clutched in his hand. Thalor Voss was a name whispered in fear across the land. Once a respected mage in the court of a powerful king, Thalor's insatiable thirst for knowledge led him down a darker path. He delved into forbidden tomes and ancient rituals, seeking power over life and death. His experiments grew increasingly grotesque, and when his necromantic practices were discovered, he was cast out, branded a heretic. Undeterred, Thalor retreated to the Forsaken Tower, where he continued his dark studies in solitude. Over the years, he amassed a legion of undead servants, bound to his will through arcane rituals. His ultimate goal was to unlock the secrets of immortality, and the vial Marcus had taken was a crucial piece of that puzzle.
How dare he?
Thalor hissed, his voice echoing through the chamber.
That vial contains the essence of life itself, a power beyond his comprehension. He will pay for his insolence.
Thalor waved his hand over the scrying pool, the image shifting to follow Marcus as he made his way back to his camp. The necromancer's mind raced with plans for retribution. He could sense the strange energy coursing through Marcus, a sign that the vial had already begun to influence him. This only fueled Thalor's anger further. With a flick of his wrist, Thalor summoned his most trusted minions. From the shadows of the chamber, four skeletal warriors emerged, their eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. Each one was armed with ancient weapons, their bones held together by dark magic.
You will find the intruder.
Thalor commanded, his voice cold and commanding.
Retrieve the vial and bring me his head.
The skeletal warriors bowed in unison, their hollow eyes fixed on their master. Without a word, they turned and marched out of the chamber, their footsteps echoing through the tower's stone corridors. Thalor returned his gaze to the scrying pool, watching as his minions set out on their grim mission. He knew that Marcus would not be an easy target. The energy from the vial had already made him stronger. But Thalor had faith in the relentless nature of his undead servants. They would not stop until their task was complete. As the image in the scrying pool shifted once more, Thalor's thoughts turned to the vial itself. It was a relic from a bygone era, created by an ancient civilization that had long since vanished. The liquid within was said to contain the essence of life, a potent elixir that could grant unimaginable power to those who knew how to harness it. Thalor had spent years searching for the vial, following cryptic clues and deciphering ancient texts. He had finally tracked it to the ruins, only to have it stolen from under his nose by an unworthy interloper. The thought of Marcus wielding such power filled him with a burning rage.
Enjoy your fleeting strength while you can.
Thalor muttered, his voice dripping with malice.
For soon, you will be nothing more than a memory, and the vial will be mine once more.
With a final glance at the scrying pool, Thalor turned away, his mind already plotting his next move. He would not rest until he had reclaimed the vial and exacted his revenge on the one who had dared to defy him. The necromancer's wrath was a force to be reckoned with, and Marcus was about to learn just how dangerous it could be. Chapter 5. The Relentless Pursuit. Marcus awoke to the unnerving sound of clanking armor and the eerie creak of bones rubbing against bones. His instincts kicked in, and he scrambled to get his leathers on and grab his weapons. The sight that met him as he emerged from his makeshift shelter made his blood run cold. A small force of skeletal warriors, their eyes glowing with an eerie blue light, advancing towards his camp. Without hesitation, Marcus drew his short sword and notched an arrow in his bow. The first skeleton lunged at him, its ancient sword swinging in a deadly arc. Marcus sidestepped, releasing the arrow, which struck the skeleton in the skull, shattering it into pieces. But as one fell, another took its place, and the relentless advance continued. He fought fiercely, managing to take down a second skeleton by cleaving its spine with his sword. But the remaining two pressed on, their attacks relentless and unyielding. Marcus realized that if he stayed and fought, he would be overwhelmed. With a final, desperate swing of his sword, he created enough space to turn and run. He sprinted through the forest, the sound of clanking armor fading behind him. The undead couldn't keep up, but Marcus was forced to leave behind his pack and all his food. He still had the vial, the coins, and his weapons, but he was without a water skin or provisions. For the next 2 days, Marcus was on the move, running, hiking, and scouting nonstop. He drank from streams when he could find them, but the lack of food and sleep began to take its toll. His muscles ached, and his mind grew foggy with exhaustion. Each step became a monumental effort, but he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant certain death. Just when he thought he couldn't go on any longer, he spotted a small farming town in the distance. The sight of it filled him with a glimmer of hope. He could hear voices and see figures moving about, tending to their daily tasks. They appeared to be human, but Marcus knew better than to rush in without caution. He crouched in the underbrush, observing the village from a distance. The buildings were simple but sturdy, made of wood and stone. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the smell of cooking food wafted through the air, making his stomach growl painfully. Marcus watched as villagers went about their routines, tending to crops and livestock. There were children playing in the dirt, and the sound of laughter reached his ears. It seemed peaceful, but Marcus couldn't afford to let his guard down. He needed to be sure it was safe before revealing himself. As he scouted the perimeter of the village, he noticed a few guards patrolling the area. They were armed with simple weapons, but they moved with the confidence of those who had faced danger before. Marcus took note of their positions and routines, planning his approach carefully. After a few hours of observation, he decided to make his move. He waited until the guards were at the far end of their patrol route, then emerged from the forest, his hands raised in a gesture of peace.
Hello?
He called out, his voice hoarse from days of running.
I mean no harm. I seek shelter and aid.
The nearest guard turned, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Marcus.
Who are you, and what brings you to our village?
My name is Marcus.
He replied, trying to keep his voice steady.
I was attacked by undead creatures and forced to flee. I have no food or water, and I need help.
The guard exchanged a glance with his companion, then nodded.
Come with us. We'll take you to the village elder. He'll decide what to do with you.
Marcus followed the guards into the village, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and apprehension. He had found temporary safety, but he knew that the necromancer's wrath was far from over. The vial he carried was a powerful artifact, and Thalor Voss would stop at nothing to reclaim it. As he was led through the village, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Perhaps here, among these simple farmers, he could find allies and a way to fight back against the dark forces that pursued him. For now, he would rest and regain his strength, but he knew that the battle was far from over. Chapter 6: A New Beginning. As Marcus was led through Eldergrove by the village guards, the calm of his surroundings stood in stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. The villagers moved about their day, their eyes flicking curiously toward him. Many whispered in low voices, their expressions ranging from intrigue to concern. He could see the tight-knit nature of this community in every passing glance, and it made him wonder how they would react once they learned the truth he was hiding. Thane Garrett and Alara Swift escorted him to the village hall, a modest yet sturdy structure made of weathered wood and stone. Its simplicity masked its importance, as Marcus could tell from the craftsmanship and the respect with which Thane and Alara treated it. This was the heart of the village, and Eldric Thorne, the elder, was its beating pulse. Thane knocked on the door with authority, but it was Alara's soft voice that called out, "Elder Thorne, we've brought someone who needs your counsel." The door creaked open, revealing Eldric Thorne, a man whose age was betrayed only by the deep lines on his face. His eyes were sharp, calculating, a man who had seen more than his share of troubles. He wore a simple robe, but the way he stood exuded the quiet strength of someone who held the trust of everyone around him. Eldric's gaze fell upon Marcus with a scrutinizing intensity. He looked him up and down, as if trying to weigh Marcus's character by sight alone. "Who is this you've brought into our village?" he asked, his voice even but laced with authority. "This is Marcus," Thane replied. "He says he was attacked by undead creatures while exploring some ruins. He seeks shelter." Eldric's brow furrowed slightly. "Undead creatures, you say? And what were you doing in those ruins, Marcus?" Marcus hesitated, the weight of the vial hidden beneath his tunic suddenly feeling heavier. He could not tell them everything, especially not about Thalor Voss. "I was exploring, nothing of real importance. I stumbled upon the ruins by accident, and the next thing I knew, I was being chased by skeletons. I ran for my life, and I ended up here." Eldric's piercing gaze didn't waver. Skeletons do not wander far from their resting places without reason. There must have been something of great value or importance that drew them out. I don't know," Marcus lied, his mind racing to keep his tone steady. He could feel Eldric's suspicion growing with every word. I was just trying to escape. Eldric took a long, deliberate breath, his eyes narrowing slightly. Perhaps, but you must understand, trust is not freely given here in Eldergrove, especially not when dark forces are at play. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat at those words. Eldric was sharp, too sharp. He had seen through Marcus's vague story, or at least suspected there was more to it. But for now, the Elder did not press further. Thane, Eldric said, shifting his focus back to the village leader. Take Marcus to the inn. Mara Linton will ensure he's looked after. But Marcus, he added, turning back to him with a grave look, do not mistake our hospitality for acceptance. Trust must be earned, and it is easily lost. Marcus nodded, bowing his head slightly. Thank you for your kindness, Elder Thorne. As Marcus followed Thane and Eldoria out of the hall, he could feel the weight of Eldric's gaze still on him. His mind raced with what might come next. The Elder's suspicion would not be easy to shake, and the secret he carried, the vial, and the danger it represented, could turn these villagers from potential allies into enemies. For now, Marcus had bought himself time. But time, he knew, was running out. As they walked toward the inn, Marcus couldn't help but glance at the villagers going about their day. The peace here felt fragile, like a delicate balance that could easily be shattered. Thalor Voss's undead minions were no doubt still hunting for him, and it wouldn't be long before they caught his scent again. He needed to plan, to gather information, and perhaps even to find allies who could help him stand against the necromancer. But first he needed rest. As they approached the inn, Thane turned to Marcus, his expression softening slightly. You handled yourself well back there. Eldric may seem hard, but he's fair. Earn his trust, and you'll find no better ally. Marcus gave a small nod, though his mind remained clouded with doubt. He had no choice but to stay hidden, for now. Chapter 7, The Restful Hearth. Thane and Eldoria led Marcus to the Restful Hearth, the village that sat nestled in the heart of Eldergrove. The inn's timbered walls and thatched roof exuded a rustic charm, and as they stepped inside, Marcus was enveloped by the scent of burning wood, hearty stew, and freshly baked bread. The warmth of the hearth immediately chased away the chill he hadn't realized he was carrying. The inside of the inn was alive with the soft chatter of villagers enjoying their evening meals. Wooden tables were scattered throughout, with lanterns hanging above, casting a golden glow over everything. The atmosphere felt comforting, a stark contrast to the tension Marcus had felt earlier when speaking to the Elder. Mara Linton, the innkeeper, was busy attending to the patrons when she noticed Thane and Eldoria. Her face lit up with a smile that seemed to make the room even warmer. She was a stout woman, with arms that spoke of a lifetime of hard work and eyes that sparkled with kindness. Thane, Eldoria, she greeted them warmly. Who is this you've brought to my inn? This is Marcus, Thane explained. He's seeking shelter after a run-in with undead. The Elder has asked you to take care of him. Mara's eyes softened as they landed on Marcus. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Undead, you say? Well, I won't ask for details right now. You must be exhausted. Any friend of Eldergrove is welcome here. She paused, her voice carrying both kindness and firmness. But understand, we look out for each other here. Eldergrove is a small village, and we rely on trust. Of course, Marcus replied, nodding gratefully. I understand. I'm very thankful for your hospitality. Mara's face softened even more. Come, Marcus. Let's get you settled in a room. She motioned for him to follow. As they crossed the main room of the inn, Marcus felt the curious gazes of a few villagers land on him. But Mara's presence seemed to ward off any direct questions. The villagers trusted Mara, and if she welcomed him, perhaps they would too in time. As Mara led him up the stairs to one of the inn's modest rooms, Marcus spoke up. I'd be happy to help out around the inn in exchange for room and board. I'm not looking for charity. Mara glanced back at him, her approving smile returning. That sounds fair. We could always use an extra pair of hands. There's always wood to be chopped, repairs to be made, and the animals need tending. You look like you could handle some hard work. Marcus smiled in return. I can. I'll start first thing tomorrow. The room Mara showed him was simple but comfortable, with a small bed, a wash basin, and a window that overlooked the village square. As Marcus settled onto the bed, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in days, he felt safe, though he knew it would be temporary. Thalor's minions wouldn't give up their pursuit so easily. Over the next few weeks, Marcus proved his worth around the inn. He worked from sunrise to sunset, helping Mara with odd tasks from repairing fences to chopping firewood. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from the fear that gnawed at the back of his mind, and he found solace in the routine. The villagers, initially wary of the stranger in their midst, began to warm to him as they saw his willingness to contribute. Every morning, Marcus rose early to haul water from the nearby stream or to help the blacksmith repair tools. By midday, he was mending rooftops or tending to the livestock. He ate his meals in the inn's kitchen, often joining Mara and her daughter for supper. He'd listen to the local gossip and laugh at their stories of village life, though he always remained guarded about his past. It wasn't long before Marcus noticed that not all was well in Eldergrove. Conversations often turned to the woods surrounding the village, where strange sightings and rumors of the undead were growing. Villagers spoke in hushed tones of skeletons seen wandering the outskirts of the forest, of crops failing in the fields nearest to the old ruins, and of livestock disappearing without a trace. Clearing out the skeletons. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth and the villagers began to retire to their homes, Mara approached Marcus with a serious expression. "Marcus, I've heard talk from the Elder. There have been more sightings of skeletons near the village. Eldergrove may not stay safe for much longer." Marcus set down the mug he was cleaning and looked up at her. "What are they planning to do about it?" Mara shook her head. "We don't have enough trained fighters here, and the skeletons are getting bolder. The Elder is considering calling for help from neighboring towns, but that could take weeks." Marcus felt a knot of guilt tightening in his chest. He knew the presence of these undead was tied to the vial he carried, the relic Thalor Voss wanted so desperately. He couldn't let the villagers suffer because of him. He stood up and grabbed his sword from the wall. "Maybe I can help. If the undead are coming from the ruins, I can clear them out." Mara's eyes widened. "You? Alone?" Marcus nodded. "I dealt with them before. I know how they fight." Mara hesitated, then gave him a small nod of approval. "Be careful, Marcus. These creatures aren't natural." As Marcus settled into village life, he often joined Thane and Eldoria on patrols, helping the village guards clear out the skeletons that gathered in greater numbers around Eldergrove. Each time they ventured into the outskirts, the fights grew more intense, and the undead more aggressive. But with every battle, Marcus found himself adapting, his movements more fluid, his strikes more calculated. He was learning the patterns of the skeletons, anticipating their attacks with ease and precision. His sword felt lighter in his hand, and each swing carried more force, as though something inside him was awakening with every clash. The other guards noticed too. "You're not just keeping up with us anymore," Eldoria commented after a particularly brutal fight. She wiped sweat from her brow and gave Marcus an appraising look. "You're leading the charge." Marcus shrugged it off, though he couldn't deny that his combat prowess had grown in a way that felt almost unnatural. The more he fought, the more the world around him seemed to slow in those crucial moments of battle. He could sense the smallest shifts in the air, the creak of bone and metal before a skeleton struck. It wasn't just skill, there was something more, and it unnerved him. One evening, after they dispatched a larger group of skeletons than usual, Marcus felt that surge again. An electric jolt that coursed through his body, leaving his muscles tighter, his reflexes sharper. He stood amidst the remains of the undead, panting but exhilarated, his heart pounding with something more than adrenaline. Thane approached, clapping him on the shoulder. "Marcus, you've become quite the asset," he said, his voice filled with respect. "We're lucky to have you here. Eldergrove's defenses are holding, thanks to you." Marcus gave a nod of gratitude, but his mind was already elsewhere. He knew this increase in undead attacks wasn't a random occurrence. Every time they cleared a patrol route, more skeletons seemed to appear in their place, as though they were being summoned. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Thalor Voss was not done with him. The necromancer's reach extended further than Marcus had anticipated, and he had no doubt that the undead's growing presence was a sign of Thalor's relentless pursuit. As they made their way back to the village under the light of the setting sun, Marcus felt a creeping sense of dread. The shadows of the trees stretched long and thin, as if they were reaching for him, pulling him back to the secret he carried. The vial, still hidden in the folds of his tunic, seemed to pulse against his chest. It had been silent for days, but now, with each passing night, he could feel its strange power more acutely. At the inn that night, Marcus sat alone near the fire, staring into the flickering flames. The warmth of the hearth did little to ease the cold knot of anxiety tightening in his gut. He had grown fond of Eldergrove, its people, its quiet rhythms. The village had become a temporary sanctuary from the storm that followed him. But deep down, Marcus knew it wouldn't last. The shadow of the necromancer's wrath loomed ever closer, and it was only a matter of time before Thalor Voss sent something far worse than skeletons. The villagers were strong and brave, but they didn't understand the true threat that was coming. Marcus had to find a way to protect them, to fight back against Thalor's dark magic. But more than that, he needed to understand the vial. He could feel it changing him with every battle, enhancing his abilities, sharpening his mind. It was both a gift and a curse, and he needed to unlock its secrets before Thalor took it, and him, by force. For now, though, Marcus would rest. His body ached from the fight, and though his mind raced with thoughts of the necromancer, he knew he needed his strength for the battles yet to come. Tomorrow, he would continue to fight, to learn, and to survive. The villagers of Eldergrove were counting on him, and Marcus would not let them fall to the darkness. The battle was far from over, but Marcus was ready. He could feel it in his bones. The war with Thalor Voss was just beginning, and the vial's true power was still waiting to be revealed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus was determined to face them head-on, even if it meant risking everything. Chapter 8: The Village Elder's Plans. Eldric Thorne sat in his dimly lit study, the only light coming from the flickering candle on his desk. The shadows it cast danced on the stone walls, echoing the tumult of thoughts swirling in his mind. His fingers absently drummed against the old, weathered wood of his desk as he reflected on the events of the past weeks. Marcus's arrival had been unexpected, but in that surprise, Eldric saw an opportunity that he could not let slip through his grasp. Marcus was no ordinary traveler. His combat skills were remarkable, yes, but there was something more, something Eldric had noticed the moment he laid eyes on him. There was an energy about the young man, an aura that hinted at powers yet untapped. Eldric, with his decades of wisdom and experience in leading Eldergrove, recognized this as something that could be harnessed, something that could be molded to serve his own ambitions. Leaning back in his chair, Eldric steepled his fingers, his eyes narrowing in contemplation. For years, he had ruled Eldergrove with a careful balance of wisdom and authority, but it had never been enough. The neighboring villages and towns thrived while Eldergrove remained small, hidden away in the forest. His influence had always been limited to the village's borders, but he had long dreamed of expanding his reach, of uniting the surrounding regions under his rule. For too long, Eldergrove had been overlooked, dismissed as a quiet, insignificant settlement. But Marcus could change all that. Eldric had watched the young man closely since his arrival. Each patrol, each skirmish with the undead, had revealed something new about Marcus's abilities. The more Marcus fought, the stronger he seemed to become, as if the very act of combat was unlocking a dormant power within him. This wasn't just raw talent, it was something far greater, and that power could be of great use to Eldric. However, there were risks. Marcus was no fool, and he had a quiet intensity about him that Eldric knew better than to underestimate. If Marcus discovered that Eldric sought to use him for his own ends, the village elder's plans could unravel before they even began. Marcus had a strong sense of duty, of loyalty to those who had shown him kindness. Eldric would need to ensure that Marcus remained loyal to him, and Eldergrove above all else. The elder rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out over the village. The night was still, the buildings cast in silver moonlight. The peacefulness of Eldergrove was deceptive, masking the ambitions stirring within its leader. Eldric knew that trust was a delicate thing, and he would need to play the long game. He couldn't push Marcus too soon, couldn't reveal his ambitions outright. He would need to guide Marcus carefully, steering him toward his own goals while allowing the young man to believe that he was acting on his own. Eldric's smile was cold as he turned away from the window. He had been in power long enough to know how to manipulate people, how to plant seeds of doubt or ambition in their minds. With Marcus, it would be no different. He would start by fostering a sense of belonging, showing Marcus that he was needed, that the village relied on him. He would reinforce the idea that Eldergrove was his sanctuary, that the people here were his people. From there, it would only take subtle nudges to direct Marcus's power toward Eldric's own ends. The vial that Marcus carried had not escaped Eldric's notice either. Though Marcus had kept it hidden, the elder had heard whispers of its significance. It was no ordinary trinket. There was power in that vial, a power that could elevate Marcus even further, or, if handled properly, could be used to elevate Eldric himself. But that would come later. For now, it was enough to keep Marcus close, to ensure that the young man's path remained aligned with his own. Eldric returned to his desk, his mind abuzz with the possibilities. He would need to orchestrate events carefully, perhaps create a scenario in which Marcus felt indebted to him, something that would solidify the bond of loyalty. And then, once Marcus was firmly under his influence, Eldric could begin to expand his reach, using Marcus as his sword, his champion. Together, they could challenge the surrounding villages, bring them under Eldergrove's banner. With Marcus's growing power and Eldric's cunning, there would be no stopping them. The elder's smile widened as he imagined it. Eldergrove no longer a forgotten village, but the heart of a powerful dominion. He could see it now. The surrounding regions, once fractured and independent, united under his rule. And Marcus, whether he knew it or not, would be the key to it all. But first, Eldric needed to ensure one thing above all else: Marcus's loyalty. The young man had already shown great promise, but there could be no room for hesitation or doubt. Eldric would need to bind Marcus to him in ways that went beyond mere gratitude. The elder's eyes gleamed with the thought of what he would do next. He had many tools at his disposal: subtle flattery, shared victories, the promise of greater power. And Marcus, for all his skill and strength, was still young, still new to this world and the dangers it held. Eldric could mold him, shape him into exactly what he needed. The village elder extinguished the candle on his desk, plunging the room into darkness. Tomorrow, he would set his plans into motion. Marcus had been a gift, a weapon that Eldric intended to wield with great care. The boy had potential, yes, but Eldric was the one who would determine how that potential would be used. And in the end, Eldergrove would no longer be a forgotten village hidden in the woods. It would be the center of something far greater. Mara Linton watched Marcus from behind the bar, her keen eyes following his movements as he worked alongside Joran Hale, the barkeeper. It was late, and the once bustling common room of the Restful Hearth had finally quieted. The last few patrons had left, leaving only the crackling of the hearth and the soft clinking of dishes as Marcus helped clear the tables. Over the past few weeks, Mara had come to know Marcus well, or at least she thought she had. He was dependable, always quick to lend a hand, and had integrated himself into village life with ease. Yet, despite his friendly demeanor and hard work, there was something about Marcus that gnawed at her curiosity. He was like a puzzle with missing pieces he guarded closely. Mara leaned against the bar, wiping down the counter as she watched him work. His story about being attacked by skeletons while exploring ancient ruins had initially been met with some skepticism by the villagers, but Marcus's actions since his arrival had silenced any doubts about his sincerity. He fought alongside the village guards, tirelessly defending Eldergrove from the increasing number of undead. But even with his bravery and skill, Mara could see the shadows that lingered in his eyes, a burden he carried but refused to share. "Marcus," Mara called out, her voice cutting through the quiet room. She waved him over, her tone gentle but direct. "Can I have a word with you?" Marcus glanced up from the stack of plates he had been organizing, his expression neutral but attentive. "Of course, Mara," he said, setting the dishes down and making his way to the bar. Mara offered him a warm smile as he approached, though her eyes searched his face for any sign of what lay beneath his composed exterior. "You've been a great help around here," she began, her voice sincere. "And I wanted to thank you for that. The inn and the village are better with you here." Marcus dipped his head slightly in acknowledgement, but Mara could see the tension in his shoulders. He was waiting for her to get to the real point, and she didn't intend to disappoint. But Mara continued, her tone softening as she leaned forward on the bar. "I can't help but notice that something's been weighing on you. You carry yourself well, but I see the way your eyes dart around sometimes, like you're expecting something to go wrong." She paused, studying his reaction. "If there's anything you need to talk about, or if you need help, you can trust me." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. His gaze dropped to the floor, his fingers absent-mindedly brushing the wood of the bar. Mara could tell he was debating how much to reveal. She didn't want to push him, but she hoped her offer of support might ease some of the weight he carried. Marcus finally met her eyes, and for the briefest moment, Mara saw a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Thank you, Mara," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "It's just, I've been through a lot recently, more than I expected, and more than I know how to deal with. I'm still trying to make sense of it all." His words were honest, but Mara sensed there was more he wasn't saying. She nodded slowly, choosing her next words carefully. "I understand. We've all been through our share of struggles here in Eldergrove. Life has a way of testing us, even when we think we're ready for anything. Just know that you don't have to face it alone. You've made a home here, whether you realize it or not, and that means we're here for you, no matter what." Marcus looked at her, his expression softening just a little. "I appreciate that," he replied, offering a small, genuine smile. "I'll keep it in mind." Mara could tell that was all he was willing to share for now, and she didn't press him further. There were walls around Marcus, and though they were slowly coming down, he was still protecting something. Whatever it was, she hoped that when the time came, he would let her, or someone, help him bear the burden. "Well," she said, straightening up and patting the bar lightly, "if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. And in the meantime, you can keep helping Jorn scrub those floors." She winked at him, breaking the tension with a touch of humor. Marcus chuckled softly, the warmth returning to his eyes. "I think I can manage that." As he returned to his work, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the young man was carrying more than just physical wounds. Something darker lingered beneath the surface, and she feared that whatever it was, it would soon come to the forefront. All she could do now was wait and hope that when Marcus finally chose to open up, it wouldn't be too late to help. Chapter 9. The Skeleton's Resurgence. As the weeks passed, the skeleton attacks grew more frequent and, disturbingly, more organized. What had once been sporadic skirmishes with small groups of mindless undead had evolved into coordinated assaults on the village's outskirts. It was as if the skeletons were following a strategy, testing Eldergrove's defenses, learning their weaknesses. Marcus, Thane, and Alara found themselves constantly on patrol, with little rest between battles. The village was under siege, and though the people of Eldergrove remained resilient, the strain was beginning to show. Marcus could feel the mounting tension each time they set out. The villagers were anxious, their once peaceful lives now overshadowed by the ever-present threat of the undead. Marcus, too, felt the pressure, but with every battle, something deep within him responded, and his skills in combat continued to sharpen. His movements became more fluid, his strikes more precise. He fought with a purpose, driven not only by the need to protect the village, but by the growing connection he felt to the strange power within him. That power, though still mysterious, had begun to surface with greater intensity. After each encounter with the undead, Marcus could feel it coursing through him, a surge of energy that left his muscles burning and his mind sharper than before. It was as if the act of fighting, of surviving, was unlocking something dormant inside him, something that was tied to the vial he kept hidden beneath his tunic. One evening, after a particularly brutal skirmish in the dark woods surrounding Eldergrove, Marcus stood panting amidst the scattered remains of skeletons. His chest heaved, and his muscles ached from the exertion, but there was more to it than just fatigue. A familiar sensation began to take hold, a surge of energy, hot and wild, flooding his veins. His vision sharpened, the world around him seeming to slow as every sound, every movement became more pronounced. His body hummed with power, as if the very act of fighting had amplified something within him. He clenched his fists, feeling the raw strength coursing through his limbs. His muscles felt like they were on fire, but it wasn't painful. It was invigorating. His senses were heightened, his reflexes razor-sharp. This energy, this power, was becoming stronger with each battle. And yet, he still didn't fully understand it. As they made their way back to the village, Thane glanced at Marcus, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. Thane had fought beside Marcus enough times to notice the changes. "Marcus," he said, his voice breaking the silence between them, "you're becoming stronger with each fight. It's almost like you're drawing power from the battles themselves." Marcus frowned, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I don't know what it is," he admitted, his voice low and uncertain. "But I can feel it. This energy, it's like nothing I've ever experienced before." He hesitated, his hand unconsciously moving to the vial hidden beneath his clothes. He hadn't told anyone about it, not even Thane or Eldoria. The vial was a secret he wasn't ready to share, especially when he barely understood it himself. Thane watched him for a moment, then nodded. "Whatever it is," he said, his tone more serious now, "it's helping us keep the village safe. And that's what matters right now." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "We couldn't do this without you." Marcus forced a smile, but inside his thoughts raced. He appreciated Thane's words, but he couldn't shake the growing unease gnawing at him. The power he was tapping into felt both exhilarating and dangerous. It was as if each fight with the undead brought him closer to something primal, something that was slowly taking hold of him. As they neared the village gates, Marcus's eyes scanned the tree line, where the shadows seemed to creep closer with each passing night. He had noticed a shift in the skeletons' behavior. They were no longer attacking haphazardly. They were testing Eldergrove's defenses, as if being directed by some unseen force. Marcus couldn't help but think of Thalor Voss, the necromancer who had sent these creatures in pursuit of him. The skeleton's resurgence wasn't random. It was a sign that Thalor's influence was growing stronger and his reach longer. That night, as Marcus lay in his small room at the inn, he couldn't sleep. The strange energy still thrummed in his veins, making his body feel restless, almost too alive. He tossed and turned, his mind swirling with thoughts of the vial and its connection to his newfound strength. What exactly had he stumbled upon in the ruins? And why was this power awakening now, just as the undead were becoming more organized? He rose from the bed and paced the room, the moonlight filtering in through the window. The vial, still hidden beneath his tunic, seemed to pulse faintly, as if responding to his thoughts. Marcus pulled it out, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly glow, its secret still locked away from him. What was this power, and how long could he control it? Marcus stared at the vial, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't continue to fight blindly, relying on power he didn't fully understand. Thalor Voss was growing bolder, and Marcus was certain that the necromancer would stop at nothing to reclaim the vial. The skeleton attacks were just the beginning. Something much darker was coming. Marcus tightened his grip on the vial, a determination settling over him. He had to figure out what this power was, and fast, for the sake of the village and for himself. The battle was far from over, and the real fight, Marcus knew, was just beginning. Eldric Thorne had been observing Marcus closely for weeks now, noting every subtle interaction, every growing connection he made with the village guards. Marcus had quickly earned their respect, especially Thane and Eldoria's, and that growing bond was something Eldric couldn't ignore. The young man had ingrained himself in the village, not just with his sword, but with his presence, steady, dependable, and quietly powerful. But what intrigued Eldric most wasn't just Marcus's loyalty or skill in combat. It was the power that seemed to radiate from him, a power Marcus himself barely seemed to understand. Eldric knew that such potential could be harnessed for far greater purposes, and he had been biding his time, watching and waiting for the right moment to act. One evening, as the village settled into the quiet lull of dusk, Eldric sent word to Marcus, asking him to come to the village hall for a private conversation. The hall, normally filled with villagers and council members, was empty now, its flickering torchlight casting long shadows across the walls. Eldric stood at the far end of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting with a patience that only years of leadership had afforded him. When Marcus entered, his gaze immediately sharpened. He had grown wary of Eldric's watchful eyes and the subtle probing that often accompanied their interactions. Still, Marcus approached with a respectful nod. "You wanted to see me, Elder Thorne?" Eldric gestured to a chair near the fire, offering Marcus a seat. "Yes, Marcus. Please sit." Marcus complied, though he remained cautious. He had learned in his short time in Eldergrove that Eldric was a man who rarely acted without a purpose. The village elder had a mind like a chessboard, constantly evaluating the pieces around him and moving them according to some grand design only he could see. Eldric seated himself across from Marcus, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes gleamed with the faintest hint of calculation. "You've proven yourself to be a valuable asset to Eldergrove," Eldric began, his voice smooth and measured. "Your skills, your bravery, none of it has gone unnoticed. You've done more for this village than most men would in twice the time." "Thank you, Elder Thorne," Marcus replied, his tone polite but guarded. He could feel the tension in the air, and he knew this conversation wasn't just about praise. Eldric leaned forward slightly, his fingers steepling as he fixed his gaze on Marcus. "But I believe there's more to your story than you've shared." Marcus's body tensed at the elder's words. He had suspected that Eldric would eventually dig deeper into his past, but he wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Still, he said nothing, waiting for the elder to continue. "I understand the need for caution," Eldric said, his voice lowering to a more intimate tone, as though they were co-conspirators sharing a secret. "We all have our reasons for keeping certain things close to the chest. But, Marcus, you are more than just a warrior. There's something unique about you. I've seen it in the way you fight, the way you carry yourself." He paused, letting the silence stretch between them. "I want you to know that you can trust me. Whatever it is you're dealing with, we can help each other." Marcus's instinct screamed at him to tread carefully. Eldric's words were wrapped in kindness, but there was an edge beneath them, a subtle pressure that suggested more than just curiosity. Marcus could feel the weight of the vial against his chest, its presence a constant reminder of the secret he carried. And though he appreciated the elder's offer, he wasn't ready to reveal anything about the vial, or the power it seemed to awaken within him. "I appreciate your offer, Elder Thorne," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. "But there are things I need to figure out on my own first." Eldric's eyes flickered, though his smile remained firmly in place. He leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands loosely in his lap. "Of course," he replied smoothly, though his voice had taken on a new layer of meaning. "I wouldn't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. Take your time. Just remember," his eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that belied his casual tone, "we're all in this together. The safety of Eldergrove is our shared responsibility. And in times like these, when threats grow stronger, we must rely on one another more than ever." Marcus nodded, though he could feel the subtle pressure of Eldric's words. The elder was reminding him of his place in the village, of the growing responsibility he had taken on. Marcus understood the unspoken message. He was becoming integral to Eldergrove's defense, and with that came expectations. "I'll keep that in mind," Marcus replied, rising from his chair. He bowed his head slightly in respect, though his mind was already racing. Eldric was not a man to be taken lightly, and Marcus knew that the elder would not stop pressing him for answers. As Marcus made his way out of the village hall, The cool night air greeted him like a welcome reprieve. He glanced around at the quiet village, the flicker of lanterns in the windows, the distant sounds of people retiring to their homes. It had become a place of solace for him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his presence here was beginning to shift the balance. Eldric Thorne had plans that involved him. Marcus knew that much. But Marcus wasn't sure if those plans aligned with what was best for Eldergrove, or what was best for him. The Elder had seen something in him, a potential power that he himself didn't fully understand. And now, Marcus had to decide how much of himself he was willing to reveal, and how much he was willing to trust Eldric's intentions. For now, he would stay vigilant. The vial, still hidden beneath his tunic, pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of the secret he carried and the dangerous road ahead. Chapter 10. The Necromancer's Offer. Eldric Thorne sat alone in his study late one night, the crackle of the hearth fire doing little to ease the tension that had settled over him. The skeleton attacks had grown more frequent, more organized, and though the villagers had held their ground with Marcus's help, Eldric knew it wouldn't last. His mind raced, searching for solutions to protect Eldergrove from the increasing threat. But nothing he could muster seemed sufficient. As he leaned over his desk, his thoughts heavy, a sudden chill swept through the room. The flames in the hearth flickered and dimmed, casting long, unnatural shadows on the walls. Eldric froze, his instincts warning him of the dark magic now filling the air. Slowly, he turned toward the far corner of the room, where the shadows seemed to swirl together, coalescing into a darker, denser mass. A voice, cold and menacing, echoed through the chamber. Eldric Thorne. The Elder straightened, swallowing his fear. He knew at once who it was. The necromancer, Thalor Voss. His voice slithered into Eldric's mind, dripping with dark intent. "You've been struggling, old man," Thalor hissed, his tone laced with mockery. "Your precious village has been on the brink of collapse, its defenses weakening despite your little champion, Marcus." Eldric remained silent, gripping the edge of his desk tightly. His heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't dare speak yet. He knew better than to engage with such a powerful force unprepared. "I know what you fear," Thalor continued, his voice now soft and persuasive. "You fear the destruction of Eldergrove, the collapse of everything you've built, the loss of your power, your influence. But it doesn't have to end that way." Eldric's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" The shadows shifted, and Thalor's form became slightly more defined, though still wreathed in darkness. "I want Marcus and the vial." Eldric's breath caught. He had suspected that the skeletons were after Marcus, but now, hearing it confirmed sent a wave of dread through him. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Thalor's laughter filled the room, low and sinister. "Then you will face the full might of my undead horde. You think these attacks have been bad?" The necromancer's voice deepened, becoming more threatening. "They were but a fraction of what I can unleash. Eldergrove will burn, and you will watch as your people fall, one by one." A cold sweat broke out on Eldric's brow. He wanted to resist, to stand strong for his village, but he could feel the weight of Thalor's power pressing down on him, threatening to crush everything he had built. Still, he remained defiant. "And if I give you Marcus?" The shadows seemed to pulse with dark energy. "Then I will spare your village. The undead will vanish from your lands, and Eldergrove will know peace once more." Thalor's voice softened again, dripping with temptation. "More than that, I can offer you power, wealth, and influence beyond your wildest dreams. You will no longer be a forgotten village elder, scraping to protect your tiny corner of the world. You will have dominion over others, your name spoken with respect and fear. All I ask is that you deliver Marcus and the vial to me." Eldric hesitated. The offer was vile, but it was seductive. He had spent his life protecting this village, and now it was hanging by a thread. Could he really sacrifice Marcus to save everyone? Could he betray the young man who had risked his life for Eldergrove? Sensing his uncertainty, Thalor pressed on. "You will have 3 days of peace," he said, his voice now a whisper, tantalizing. "As a gesture of goodwill, I will cease the attacks for 3 full days. In that time, You will prepare Marcus for my arrival. I will send 2 of my finest to collect him and the vial. In exchange, your people will be safe, and you will have power beyond anything you've ever known." Eldric's mind raced. The village could survive, flourish even, and Marcus had brought this danger to their doorstep. Perhaps, Eldric reasoned, it wasn't so wrong to give him up. He had no other solution, no other way to protect Eldergrove from being wiped off the map. "I'll do it," Eldric said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But the village cannot know. I won't risk my position or their trust." Thalor's shadowy form shifted, and the necromancer's voice oozed with satisfaction. "Of course. You're a clever man, Eldric. I knew you'd see reason." The chill in the room deepened as Thalor's form began to dissipate. "You have 3 days," he reminded the elder. "Then my agents will come for Marcus." In the days that followed, the attacks stopped completely. Eldergrove breathed a collective sigh of relief, the villagers believing that the worst was behind them. Eldric, however, could find no such peace. He hated the deal he had made, hated that he had given in to the necromancer's demands, but he couldn't deny the flicker of excitement that had crept into his thoughts. Power, wealth, influence. Perhaps giving up Marcus wasn't so terrible after all. Now, he needed a plan to hand over Marcus without arousing suspicion. Eldric knew that the guards, especially Thane and Eldoria, were growing fond of the young man, and any sudden disappearance would raise questions. He couldn't afford that. After careful thought, Eldric concocted a plan. He would invite Marcus to the village hall under the guise of a private meeting to discuss the village's defense. There, he would offer Marcus a drink, one laced with a powerful sleeping draught. Once Marcus was incapacitated, it would be easy to hand him over to the necromancer's henchmen when they arrived. Eldric would stage the entire event to make it look as though Marcus had chosen to leave the village, claiming he had unfinished business in the ruins where he had first encountered the skeletons. It was a simple enough plan. Once Marcus was gone, the villagers would eventually move on. Eldergrove would prosper, and Eldric would rise to greater heights than he had ever imagined. He could feel the dark promises of power beckoning him closer, and though he hated what he was about to do, part of him relished the prospect. All that remained was to wait for Thalor's agents to arrive.